Hello and welcome to this month's edition of Islington Mill and, the monthly podcast series about the cultural life and times of one of the UK's most beloved artist-led creative hubs, Salford's Islington Mill. For this month's podcast, I visited Studio 304 to speak to Rachel Moorhouse, who is one half of the art company Art with Heart. Art with Heart are a Salford-based company who are shaping change together through performances, workshops and people-led creative projects. I spoke to Rachel about the different multimedia projects the company is involved in and the different kinds of social change that they are also engaged in this fairly wide-ranging conversation that also took in aspects of Salford's history that I didn't know about, what it means to be a producer in the arts sector, and also we found out that we both used to work at the same job, which is a little bit of a turn up for the books and the first time that this ever happened on Islington Mill and so with that, I'm going to hand myself over to myself again for this month's edition of Islington Mill and with Rachel Moorhouse of Art with Heart. So I am here in Studio 304 with Rachel Moorhouse from Art with Heart. How are you doing, Rachel?
I'm good, thank you. I am excited today.
Yeah?
I'm a big women's football fan.
Okay.
And we won the Euros last night, so
really?
I am...
Pretend I don't know. Tell me what happened.
It was a very exciting match. I actually went to some of the games early in the tournament, so I was very excited. I went to the Carlton Club, which was a really great, super lovely, queer inclusive environment to be in, and it just felt really nice to see so many people celebrating women's football. And it was tense because it went to penalties, and I hate that.
Yeah, I heard that England won.
Yeah, we won.
Who was it against?
Spain.
Okay.
So they beat us in the World Cup. So it was a bit of a grudge match, a bit of a rivalry.
Right.
And I did at one point check my heart rate, and it was at 100 on the
right.
watch during the penalties. So that was
penalties. That's exciting.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah.
So I'm in a place of euphoria, but also sort of tired and a bit croaky.
Right. Okay.
I've got my croaky tones on today.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I'll keep it light then. So, you are involved with a project called Art with Heart.
Yeah, that's correct.
Can you tell us what Art with Heart is?
Yeah, so we used to say we're a theatre company, which is kind of how we started out and what both of our backgrounds are in. So I run the company with another artist called Sarah Emmett. But we're sort of a multi-art form company, and essentially we make creative projects and we do them in different environments and with different people. So kind of in art spaces, community spaces, and in education spaces. And I think the strand that runs through all of our work is that in some way, shape or form, we're looking at social change, whether that be on a small scale, changing perceptions around a certain subject, or on a larger scale where we might be working with communities to make art projects and directly kind of bringing in decision makers to see that art and make decisions around that. But yeah, it's kind of creative projects and theatre shows, so projects, performances and workshops is what we do.
How would you distinguish between social change of a small scale and social change of a large scale? So
I would say in terms of social change on a small scale, so with we did a project called the Golden Years Caravan, which was working with elders across Greater Manchester to challenge stereotypes around ageing, which started from a conversation I had with my grandma, who is 94.
Okay.
And I was trying to get her to engage with some more social activities, and I suggested that she went to the group at the church at the end of the road. At this point, I think she was 90. She just turned 90, and she said, "Oh no, love, it'll be full of old people." And I was like, "Gran, you will be the oldest person in there." I was like, if that's your perception of older people. So we made this project which was looking at kind of older people in visual media, because that was where they felt least represented, and particularly looking at stock imagery. I don't know if you've ever Googled old people. I suggest you do it afterwards.
Yeah, I like in my mental image, I'm just like, yeah.
Yeah, paint me, what do you think it's going to be? Like it's very clinical, care home. They're like being taught how to use an iPad and like thumbs up smiling. Right. Everyone's like white with silver hair.
Yeah.
it's affluent people like on a cruise in white linen.
Okay.
It's it's one or the other. So that was a really interesting project, and I suppose for us the small social change with that was the individual stories that people went away with, where particularly actually a lot of older people came into the project who were like, I have been focusing on like what I can't do rather than what's left in life, and then younger people who talked about the fact that they were excited to age and all the possibilities, and for the participants involved in that, their kind of individual experiences of continuing to go on and be creative, and get involved with things. And I suppose that's more like individual. And then in terms of kind of a larger impact, I suppose it's things that have like a ripple effect that will continue. So like institutional stuff. So we made a theatre show about Sarah, who we're in the company with, was diagnosed with ADHD in her 30s. The show we made in 2016, so there wasn't as much conversation about it then. And there was a real lack of awareness around ADHD in adulthood. And as part of that, as well as this kind of performance, we partnered with the ADHD Foundation, a national charity, and we did some training with schools. And we had a school get in touch with us afterwards who said after they'd seen the play and been to the training, they basically changed their entire approach to working with neurodivergent kind of pupils. Cool. And it had changed for the better. So for us, that touch point is that one individual changes the structure of how those children interact with education. And even after that teacher's left, that structure's in place. So that's kind of like a longer ripple than just one person watching a show. And the smaller ripple is we had several people get in touch to say, after I watched the show, I got diagnosed with ADHD. So I suppose that's the kind of, where are the bigger impacts that's going to kind of really impact the people that we engage with, and where are the smaller, more individualised changes?
To go back to the Golden Years project, what did the actual project itself entail? Because now you've just got me thinking about stock images of old people and people on a cruise, and it's like, so did you recreate stock images of old people doing fun things and looking sexy and stuff?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So we, you can't see because you're hearing this podcast, but we've got some of the images on the wall here with one of the groups. These are half of them. Then we've got some more afterwards. But so we went to the groups, and what we did is we would talk to them about existing images of elder people, like how they felt about it. And then we also showed them some alternative images. So this was a project where we collaborated with Joe Smith, who's another mill artist, just down the corridor. And we showed them some kind of really exciting alternative images as well. So like there's a famous weightlifter in her 80s who's like really punk. And like, so we kind of showed some of those different sides. But we talked about things that were important to them, how they'd like to be represented. It was a really collaborative process. And they felt like they were quite stale, so they wanted like lively photos. So with the group that we worked in during lockdown, it was a real mixture. So we had somebody who used to be Jagrati, who used to be an engineer. She was like the first female engineer in the 70s. And she was really interested in portraying that about kind of like her love for science and how that's continued with age. So she wanted to have something where we could have like some equipment, and weirdly Joe went out and found something, and she said that was the very first like computer equipment she'd ever used. Whereas Joe was like, is this okay for like a background image? And then we had another
so what before you go on, what did her image end up being?
So her image was the background of it was like a whiteboard, a chalkboard with scientific equations on it. And then we had a desk laid out with the equipment, but then also kind of personal statues and figurines that related to her faith that was important to her. Because she talked a lot as well about being kind of like one of the first South Asian women in kind of in tech and in engineering, and how passionate she was about it.
So she was a pioneer.
Real pioneer. But didn't really speak of herself in that way. But I think making the portrait and then having like a reflection on that, she did kind of a little bit of an audio piece for us. I think it was kind of nice for her to go back and celebrate that. So like really different, and then but then also kind of keeping it open. So we had somebody who wanted to do more of like an abstract piece, and was really into westerns.
Okay. So
wanted to create this like film poster for a western,
right?
And really had this idea of juggling his own head. So Joe took like different like angles and different expressions of him sort of like juggling his own head, and it worked out. It was really cool, and it was really, again, with us being led by them, really unexpected compared to what other people brought to the group. And then he had that on display during lockdown in his local community centre, and the local like brass band who use it composed a Western theme tune for him, which is incredible.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. So it's kind of going off their interest. So we had someone else who still plays rugby in like his 70s, and so it was like a real mix. So it was kind of going off people's passions, but often it was just them wanting to capture. I think like we talked a lot about being in motion and being physical and being active, because that was a big thing that people, obviously some people have like mobility restrictions as they age, but for a lot of people, like their world is much more vibrant than those like clinical, you know.
The one that comes to mind, I think it's like an old lady with glasses like mine, just staring at kind of thing, lifting her glasses up so she can see the screen better. But it's like, but it is interesting to talk about that, because I think people's perceptions of what aging and quote old people do are changing. Because, for instance, my parents are very old themselves. They're like, basically, my mum's 90 now.
Okay.
And when I compare, not exactly like her life, but the way she looks, maybe, to my granny who passed away when she was like 94, it's like the looks are so different.
Yeah.
And I think we're stuck in a very kind of prescribed notion of what old age means in terms of representation. But actually, when you look around now, it's like old people, like, you know, they're wearing clothes that they would have worn in the 90s and stuff, which is different from what their parents would have worn in the 70s and 60s. And I think, that's quite interesting, actually.
Well, that was one of the things we looked at fashion a lot, actually, in kind of in the process, and looking at like just some really awesome images of like kind of like street photography of elders. And again, we were talking about that sort of almost elder uniform that was a thing growing up for me in terms of what my grandparents wore, and it being more formal clothing, and actually that not being representative. What was quite nice though is there were people who had maybe hobbies that we would associate more with, you know, people who are retired around like knitting or gardening or things, but the way they wanted to express those hobbies was very different. And actually, again, apologies because this is not visual media, but there's like, we had a knitting ninja, one of the women who were these brilliant women in Rochdale who were highly skilled craftspeople and cooks, and so we tried to find creative ways to kind of show that like how much they can do. That is, because also another thing that I think, well, I'm an immigrant, so I moved here from Ireland, but I feel like as time goes on, the elder generations are becoming more diverse as communities who have been here longer now are having their own elders who've maybe lived here for 50, 60 years. You know, so the perception of what does it mean to look like you're old, I think it's definitely changing. It's really changing, and one of the things that was really beautiful on the project actually, because the group that we worked with in Rochdale were called Apnagar, and it was a Bangladeshi women's group, and there was a mixture of women in that group who, some of them wanted to be in front of the camera and some of them didn't, and one of the most beautiful things was when we were touring the caravan and we were outside Oldham Library, there was a young lad, probably in his 20s, and he stopped and he walked around the exhibition, and afterwards he was like, this is one of the women called Naseem, who's the oldest woman in the group, and she was absolutely sick of doing like chair aerobics. Like, she had so much energy, she loved dancing, she had so much, so like her... She would only be told to do chair aerobics because of her age? It was just like, you know, some of the activities that they're given are like, they try to meet the needs of everyone, but they're not stimulating for a lot of people. So, and you know, so she kind of made us up our game, which was great in terms of the stuff that we were doing, but she loved dancing, so we've got this image of her dancing with confetti everywhere. And this young lad came up to us and was like, I love this. This is how my grandma is, but the portrayal of elder women in my community in the media, or the way they're talked about, is not this. And this is really beautiful to see them like taking up space like this. And it was really lovely to get that insight again as to where there are those kind of cultural perceptions of aging and more specific ones, and that celebration, I think, of like different communities. It was really lovely.
Cool. So the Golden Years Caravan project focused on visual imagery.
Yeah, and we also had a short film as part of it. So that was with a different group. So there were a few people in that group who were really passionate about doing a film project, but didn't know where to start. So we kind of went through the process of them learning to storyboard. We worked with a guy called Jim, incredible Jim. Jim, so you understand like how amazing Jim is. He went back to do a new degree, I think, at the age of, 88. Yeah, wow. In art. He's an incredible artist. Never did it professionally. And when he went back to sign up at the university in Liverpool, I think it was John Moore's, they had to literally change the date of birth on their system because they didn't go that far back.
God,
I was like, Jim, you're a rock star. Like, they've literally changed the system.
Yeah.
But Jim's eyesight was going, and he said, before my eyesight goes, like, I've done a lot of painting and things, but I'd really love to be able to make a film and to kind of, so for us it was finding different ways to kind of adapt that so that people get involved. But again, that was one of the things where they felt really not represented in like film, TV, or like adverts. So we made a short film with them. So that was screened inside the caravan, and then we had this exhibition outside of it.
Right, cool.
So, but that was kind of, I suppose that's, in terms of how we work with the social change stuff, we'll often work with a group and we'll ask them what art form they would like to express it with.
Because that's what I'm coming to next, because then you talked about the ADHD thing being more performative.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking Art with Heart isn't constricted to any specific kind of artistic output?
No, I think, and over the years has grown even more so. So we'd always kind of engage with other art forms, but we are more and more led by who the people that we're working with, like what they would like and how they would like to express that. So myself and Sarah don't have the skills of a visual artist. We might have some understanding of film, but so we are often collaborating with artists, and we'll step into whatever art form feels like a good fit.
Sure.
Which is a really nice way. It can be hard sometimes to plan.
Yeah.
But I feel like we've got into a really good rhythm of how that works.
So you just mentioned planning.
Yeah.
So how do you devise projects if it's very client-based?
Yeah, so the way that we work, so we're fortunate that we kind of part of the council's portfolio of cultural organisations, so we do have some core funding, which is something till a few years ago we didn't have, which made it hard to like plan projects in advance. But we tend to work with, most projects that we do have some sort of legacy, so we're often working with similar groups or communities. So we'll often engage with them very early in the process and find out, so we might know that there's a subject that we want to explore, or that we've spoken to a community group and they've expressed an interest in a certain art form. And then we'll kind of plan that into our next lot of funding. But we always...
Right.
So we'll kind of go, this is a rough outline of what the projects might be.
Yeah.
But within that, they might take different...
So there's like consultation as a part of it.
Oh yeah, it's that kicks it all off. It's kind of a full conversation about what people want, what they need, even down to speaking to certain groups about, what kind of artist would be a good fit for you, like not just in skill set, but in like person, who would be a right fit for you. And those conversations have come earlier and earlier because we've realised it really benefits it.
Yeah.
And those conversations around access points and things, so that then by the time we come to like engage the artists and things. But I don't know that we would be able to work in such a detailed way if we didn't have that. When we were project to project, it was really hard to do that because there's only so much you can do, and you don't like to promise people things if you're not going to necessarily be able to deliver it.
But being able to access core funding from the council, I assume, is freeing you up to more time and space to be able to do that kind of consultation and project development?
Definitely. Particularly that kind of going out to meet with people and chat with people. You know, we're still both part-time, run the company and kind of on individual projects.
Yeah.
You know, so the core time it's us two, and on projects I think we had one year where we worked with 70 freelancers, so that was like a big year. But our projects kind of shrink and grow, but at the heart of them is always that kind of sense of responding to need in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did Art with Heart come about? How did it come together? How did you start?
So it was actually started by Sarah back in 2010.
Okay.
She was sort of just like a one-woman band doing everything and kind of not realising she was doing as much as she was doing. So like facilitating creative workshops, writing a play, writing plays, and also kind of doing lots of producing her own work. And she's talked about this a lot. She talks about the fact of kind of coming from a working class background, feeling like she didn't always feel easy to step into saying I'm a producer, but was actually producing her own work to a really high level.
Yeah.
And when I met Sarah, I was working at Contact I went through a training scheme at Contact Theatre to be a young producer. I remember just seeing a little poster. I knew I didn't want to be like on stage, but I had no idea what a producer was, and that course really changed my life. It was a route into the industry. So Sarah asked me she knew I'd done some directing, and she asked me to direct her first like kind of piece that wasn't just her solo, which was called Secret Diaries of a Teenage Queer.
Okay.
And it was from her friend drunkenly one night showing her a load of diaries that she'd written growing up queer in like the 80s. And just the really cheesy like teenage, all the stuff in the show that people are like, that's not real. It's like, that is the whole section that's real. Like so we always laugh because Sarah's version is like, I gave Rachel a 3-minute pitch and, you know, she happily came on board, and I'm sort of like, I ended up being here without ever agreeing to it. So Sarah asked me if I'd direct the play, and I wasn't very confident, and I kind of didn't like a lot of the way that the industry and rooms were run and the director hierarchy, and it just... So I'd gone into more producing and supporting artists, and I kept saying I'll produce it, I'm not the one to direct it. And then, I'm sure you know Ricky Beadle-Blair.
Yes.
So then Sarah went to a workshop with Ricky Beadle-Blair, and he taught her how to be as persuasive as he is.
Right.
And we had a meeting, and apparently I agreed to direct it. And then, you know, the rest is history. We made that show, and one of the things that brought us both together, I think, was that we felt like there was a lot of work being made in theatre at the time that was dealing with big, gnarly subjects. There wasn't much support happening for audiences around it. So we were always really keen for there to be... So like with Secret Diaries of a Teenage Queer, we had a school-specific show and then like an adults version of the show, which was longer. And one of the things that we're really aware of is often teachers will be given like a leaflet of a lesson plan, and they don't have time to follow that up afterwards. So we were like, okay, let's have like a compulsory workshop, so they're there for 2 hours and we can discuss some of the themes and we can have those sensitive conversations in a way that perhaps is a bit more open than an education environment, and we can signpost them to brilliant places like the Proud Trust and organisations.
So you were actively involved in the support as well?
Yeah, that was always a big thing for both of us, and those were the conversations that started. Was whatever project we had, and at that time it was theatre shows, there was never just the show, it was like, what was the ripple effect? So we worked with somebody who did training for kind of like LGBT inclusive curriculum, and they went into schools and they talked about, you know, like trained teachers on that. So it was kind of always like, how do we do this other stuff around it and have an impact beyond just the people who see our show in a studio, in a theatre. And then we sort of just decided, for a few years, we were doing like projects and workshops, and then we both got to the point where we're like, we need to be all in. So I kind of quit my part-time job in an organisation, and we would only take jobs that meant that like they didn't take up any of our brain space. So I sold tickets at the Lowry.
Right, just menial.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, and it was, you know, it was great. Like, you know, met some really cool people, but just things where it's like I could check out of it, or I wasn't like super responsible or worried. I sold suitcases, the Lowry Outlet Mall.
So you sold tickets at the Lowry? Yeah.
Did you? Okay, earlier on, I was like, I feel like we worked together, and it took me a minute. It took me a minute to be like, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Did you work more on the front desk, or were you in the
I was upstairs,
little cubby hole?
I was upstairs a lot, and I did it part-time. I had a couple of jobs, and then towards the end I did start working at the front desk a bit more.
Yeah.
But I would say that I worked mostly upstairs in the ticketing office on the phone.
I was going to say that's probably the one. You know, when I was like, I can't think what would come up.
Let me just pause this.
This is, yeah.
And we're back in the room, and we're just talking about what an amazing experience we had working at the Lowry and how much we love them. Thank you so much for everything you've given us, the Lowry Theatre. Now, moving on with the conversation. What are you guys working on at the moment?
We're working on a project called Salford Voices.
Okay.
Which is actually, in part, a podcast project itself. So we're working with community groups across all 8 neighbourhoods of Salford. So Salford turns 100 next year. They're celebrating 100 years of official city status.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yes, we didn't until like the council sort of mentioned it in passing at a meeting we were at, and like, that's really cool. So it's quite a new city really to have only had city status.
100 years of city status?
Yeah.
Before, it was still Salford before that?
Yeah, it was still Salford, but it wasn't a city. And some areas within Salford, so like Little Hulton only became part of Salford as opposed to like more of a Lancastrian kind of links.
Yeah.
Sort of 30 years ago, but the majority of neighbourhoods became Salford as a city.
Yeah.
So that we heard like there are going to be some kind of council celebrations, and we've been doing a really interesting project last year with the culture team at the council, who are really keen to do things differently and to be really led by communities. So we did a project where we went out and we ran creative projects. We asked people, what do you want to do? What do you want to like have fun playing with creatively? And as part of that, and during those creative workshops, we talked to them about like, what does culture mean to you? What does community mean to you? Like, what do you want to see in your local area? Like, what doesn't exist? What do you want to see? Where do you want to see it? And one of the most interesting things, which I think we thought would probably happen, but across all of the kind of different districts where we spoke to people, was culture's a really like weighty word, and it can feel inaccessible for some people. But for most people that we spoke to, for them, culture was collective identity, personal identity, and community. And they talked about kind of creativity and art and things that they were interested in, but the kind of culture thing for them, there was this real sense of like what a Salfordian identity is. And we had so many like really interesting conversations across, and we thought we'd really love to do a podcast that captures some of this kind of energy and is sort of like an audio time capsule for Salfordians in the future. So we're looking at how we work with Salford Museum for that to go into the archives. So we're partnering 6 writers with 3 community groups, and they're going to create a piece of writing. It might end up being a song, a spoken word piece, a conversation. With 3 different community groups across Salford. So an awesome youth group in Little Hulton, Community Little Hulton, and they're going to look at what in 2126, so in another 100 years' time, what do they want? What would they want Salford to be in an ideal world? Because they're going to be the ones inheriting it, and their children as well. And then we're working with a brilliant men's mental health group called Talk About It Mate, and they work across Salford. And they're going to be looking at what could... So until about 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't know that the city motto for Salford, which is in Latin, is like the welfare of the people is the highest law. Okay. So with them, we're exploring actually if that was true, if people's welfare, if health and happiness were of the utmost like echelon of importance for people, what would that city look like? Like, how would it be run? What would architecturally, what could it look like? How would like decisions be made? All of those things. So sort of like slightly utopian, but also looking at current structures and what we'd like to change, and like so that'll be with that group. And then we're going to be working with Broughton Community Centre, who we did a project with last year. And actually with them, we're partnering them with 2 textile artists who are based at Paradise Works here in Salford. And they're going to be creating, like, you know, like the old kind of socialist union banners that the workers used to make. We're going to be making a collection of those, which will kind of have a bit of a like motto manifesto for Salford. And again, we're hoping they'll be hung in like a place of civic importance for years to come.
So again, this is a very multimedia kind of sounding project.
Very, very different. I'm working with 2 other artists to create a poem. They're going to be sort of roving, so they're going to go and sit in a cafe one day, in a library another day, and ask like, what does it mean to be a Salfordian? And then that might end up in a film format. So it is kind of multi-art form.
Cool.
And then we hope to kind of present that as part of the official sort of city celebrations.
Cool. And just to clarify when you say podcast, because I still think that, I mean, this is a podcast, what we're doing right now, but also I suppose it could be, excuse me, it could be like a piece of fiction or a poem or something. It's like, when you say you're creating podcasts, are they going to be interview based or are they going to be...
So they'll all have a sort of structure. So we're partnering with Reform Radio, who are brilliant, loads of community stuff. And we've kind of got this, each episode will be 12 minutes long. And within that, the structure is kind of, we'll chat to the artists and the participants. There'll be like a little intro from me and an intro and outro from us. But then there'll be a sort of around 4 to 5 minute piece. Apart from with the textile artist, that'll be more interview based because obviously that's not an audio piece. We've kind of said, look, 4 to 5 minutes to create something. So that could be individual poems. It might be that like, they recreate a town hall meeting for 5 minutes in the future. So it's kind of really flexible, but they'll have this sort of interview-based part of it as well. So there'll be a bit of a kind of like the process side of things and then the creative output. So there'll be like 4 12-minute podcast episodes, and then we're going to have these short 2-minute ones. We've got a pop-up celebration station, official name, that's going around Salford this summer. Where people can be interviewed about their life in Salford. We've had some really interesting stuff. So it's a bit more like there'll be 2-minute episodes that are more personal stories.
Do you know what? I do miss living in Salford actually. Because me and my partner, who we discovered just there off mic that we're currently living in the city centre. But before that, when we first moved in together, it was into that tower block. So we lived for a decade in Salford, actually.
No way.
And I do quite like living in Manchester city centre at the moment, but when you're talking about this kind of stuff, it does make me miss Salford a bit, because living in the city centre is very hectic. And when you're talking about like people sitting in the library or sitting in the cafes, and I'm already thinking like, I haven't, like, there's a particular cafe I love in Eccles, on the top of the hill, looking down into Eccles town, and I haven't been there in 5 years I haven't been there in 5 years, but we moved 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you're talking about the kind of like localities available in Salford for people to do stuff, it's making me kind of pine for living in Salford again. Yeah,
we're really sad that our favourite cafe, it was like Community Cafe, which was in the centre of Eccles, not far from where the Wilco was. It was amazing. They had we went in there to have meetings with them, and we got roped into 3 rounds of bingo. And it's a sort of place where where
the market is.
Yeah.
Where the market is.
Yeah. And the ratio of butter to crumpet was just excellent. You wouldn't get it in the Northern Quarter. They're not. It's sourdough crumpets, and there's barely any butter on it. Those are the places we love in Salford, and we kind of want to make sure we're in those spaces to kind of capture lots of different voices, I suppose, across Salford, and different access points for people who might want to be involved, who maybe wouldn't come up to someone with a mic on the street, but actually just want to have a chat about Salford without a microphone, or and actually then a poet's going to go away and use some of their words, so they can just. We're always trying to find different ways for people to come into it, and as soon as you say writing, it's like people think it has to be a finished version. Actually, it's just a conversation, and you're giving us a bit of inspiration, and we're kind of maybe writing something together.
Do you have anything going on in Weast? That's where we used to live.
Yes, so we're going to be at Langworthy Cornerstone.
Oh God,
so that's where Talk About It Mate have 3 groups, and one of them's based there.
Right,
So we're going to be running our weekly sessions out of there.
Cool.
And we're really excited. We love what they do at the Cornerstone, and they're just brilliant.
We used to live just round the corner from that.
No way.
Yeah.
It's nice. There's a lot of community spaces around there.
Yeah, there is.
And there's an awesome organisation. You probably walked past it, but it was called Visit from the Stalk. We've partnered with them before, but they provide a lot of support in terms of material things, clothing, toys, for families in the area, as well as a bit of pantry sometimes with food stuff. They're doing some really awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love Weast.
Yeah, it is.
Sarah's had family. She grew up in Essex, but she had a lot of family in Weast. So.
Yeah, they had I think it was the first ever Pride just a couple of months ago, Weast Pride.
No way. I love those small prides. They're like where it's at.
Because a friend of mine was performing at it and I was asking like, where is it? And I think it's on Langworthy Road. There's like an old man's club, not an old man's club, like a social club.
I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was in there, and I was like, that's
Love
wild.
That.
Because me and my partner would walk past there and go, that's the kind of place that we're not going to go, because we have the perception of it, it's an old man's club, I don't know how open to, homosexuals or whatever. Yeah. But just to find out that that's where the actual Weast Pride was.
I know.
That's cool.
It's really cool. It's really interesting to see those things change and to see them embrace them. But yeah. Big shout out to Langworthy Cornerstone. They're space. And just like their reception team are amazing. Mm-hmm. Just all the lovely people. Just the ones that get stuff done.
Yeah. Quietly just do things.
Yeah.
So that's your current project. Do you have anything further down the line that you can talk about? Any ideas brewing at the moment?
So there's another theatre show which is in the kind of we've got bits on paper. Mm-hmm. It's a really weird climate in the theatre industry at the moment. We're really fortunate to have, which is rare, but to have been kind of successful with all our theatre show bids to kind of funders. Mm. And we had we were going to be touring a show this year, and then this sort of project, a version of it, would have been happening next year. Okay. More in line with the centenary, but actually this is great because everything will be ready to be showcased in the centenary. But we were originally going to be doing a theatre show, which I don't know when it will next be up. It's a really hard time. I'm really glad that we make lots of different work that's not just theatre, because it's a really disheartening time, both for like people working in institutions and organisations and freelance artists. Mm-hmm. There's so much competition, like the success rates on funding. So many of the funds are now having to go to urgent things like be redirected to food banks where they might have supported the arts. Yeah. Education and kind of missions to combat poverty and rightly so they've had to be diverted to frontline services, but it's meant there's been less money around, so we're not sure when this will be, which is a shame because it feels like it's a real project of now, but we've been looking at a show that is currently called The Engine Room, but it looks at, so it sort of plays with the idea that there is this underground movement that's happening that potentially used to be a bit of an arm of the government, but is sort of at arm's length from it. And it's sort of a group of people who are dedicated to building joy and connection. Okay. And have these underground... So, like, things have got so bleak. Everyone's really divided. Mm-hmm. Everyone's on, like, two sides of things. No one's meeting in the middle. People aren't gathering. There aren't as many opportunities to gather. Because that was a big thing for us of why we love theatre, was, like, the physical sense of gathering, that people get when they go to church congregation or go to the working men's club for a pint on a Friday night, and there being not as many spaces like that anymore. So it was going to be this sort of secret project where there's a lot of hush hush even within the theatre itself, and kind of like things, the whole show packs away at the end in a secret way. But it was going to be really interactive, and we're going to kind of talk to people about, and gather along the tour suggestions for how to build a more joyful, connected society, and looking at kind of movements like mutual aid that have helped people, and I think as well trying to look at challenging some of those myths within kind of communities about one another that are being peddled by media and peddled by politicians. So try and find like a unifying way, but also the show was silly and you get free cake, and it was hopefully it will end, it's a spoiler, but it'll probably be 5 years so people have forgotten, but with a mass kazoo chorus of Together in Electric Dreams. So it was very silly and playful, and we're kind of, it's there, it's cooking. So I think that will be something that's kind of happening on the back burner of this project. But actually, this whole project is massively informing it, because we're literally learning from communities. Like, wow, they're doing that, and that's how they're supporting one another, or that's how they're having conversations. And so it's kind of fascinating for that.
To be honest, kind of thing sounds more like a life work than a project, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because I do think about that myself as well. It's like, where do we go to form personal connection away from screens?
Yes.
Away from monitored screens and being surveilled all the time, and creating spaces, because that's what me and my partner have always done, is create spaces where we can party, but also the freedom that those spaces allow you to express yourself, allow people to find themselves, and stuff like that. And stuff like that is getting smaller and smaller, and even like, this could be another pause in the, even in the place where we find ourselves right now, because thinking about how Islington Mill has changed so much over when I started coming here, and like in the last 10 years as well, and this is not the fault of Islington Mill at all. It's about technology and how it's changing our lives and how it's changing the lives of the younger generations who don't get to experience a lot of,
or like gather in the way of like, I remember just coming to like chaotic, sweaty club nights here, and like that kind of, I feel like that, that culture of that DIY kind of community gathering. And I think a lot of people, their energy is just gone. They're so kind of over consuming all the terrible things that are happening that like even just learning those tools of connection. I have a lot of conversations with younger members of my family about that and things that they find really difficult, and I'm so happy that I grew up on like the what I consider the bright side of like smartphones, like my teenage years were like pre-Facebook.
My developmental phase was before that stuff came in.
And I it just the impact that has. And funnily enough, the research that we did when we were chatting to people about culture, I'd say I think it was the highest percentage of what people wanted were opportunities to gather and connect. That was the main thing they wanted. And they were like, great, if that comes with an opportunity to listen to music or get involved with something. But actually the amount of people who are just crying out for human connection. But it kind of takes someone to think about, like you're saying, even like the club nights that we used to host, to have that like considered approach, and also to be of that community, like to organise it, because that's a big thing that, you know, the culture team at the council didn't want to do. They don't want to be like, this is what we think you want. Because actually we have no idea. So I find it all really interesting, but that's kind of like in that life's work, it's like to create spaces where people can come together and like talk about the heavy stuff, but in like a safe, comfortable environment. So it's like we're always like, we're creating like comfortable creative spaces. Like people need to feel safe to do so. Right, I've got one final question for you, but it might be a huge bomb to drop. But you mentioned before that you found it difficult to define and place yourself as a producer of culture, but then you went and you did a course or something? Or? I worked at Contact. They had a young producers course. Is there any information or wisdom or tips or anything that you could impart to anybody who maybe finds themselves in a similar position? Like they are cultural creators, but they don't know how to position themselves as producers? I think the first thing that I'd say is you already are a producer. Like if you're making your own work happen and putting things out there, you're already producing it. Also, the word's really scary, which was one of the reasons why I was really hesitant about even going for this like young person scheme, because I was like, I don't know what that word means. When I think of producers, I think film producers, or music. I think of people who have money. This is maybe, and this is the thing as well. It seems such a kind of vague, nebulous term. In terms of like, what does that actually mean? It feels like you're basically, for me, being a producer, before kind of doing my own stuff, was a lot of the time was like, it's just connecting and supporting like artists and like people who consume that art, who might make that art with artists but I think one of the things that I would say is just one of the things that so we do a scheme called Artist Brew Days, and that came about because when we both started in the industry, people who were more experienced than us said yes when we asked them, can we buy you a cup of coffee and ask you what this means, because this contract scares us and we don't understand the language in it because it's archaic and it's scary. So we started doing good Artist Brew Days, where we had certain days of the year where we opened up our office and it was like, come in, there's like no question that is, you know, too silly, there's no subject, like we have a certain skill set, or we can link you to people, just come and have a chat with us, which is something that we carry on doing, and we always say to people, like, come and ask us if we've got time, like, we want to support other people. But I think don't be afraid to ask for support. I think one of the things when people are making art and they consider themselves a producer is, whether it's with an organisation or an institution that's creative, or a more commercial body, or funders, it's often, the perception of it is very almost like parent-child, where actually all of those organisations, institutions massively rely on us as creatives.
Yeah.
We are kind of like their lifeblood. So I think within that, remembering that when you're approaching those places, and like really respecting yourself as artists and what you bring to that conversation, but not being afraid to ask questions if you're not sure of something, or not being afraid to kind of, I think speaking to one another, we're really bad in this country at talking about like money, for example.
Oh, absolutely. It's so taboo.
It's so taboo.
It's so taboo. And then you meet Americans and they're like, well, I don't know. And they
telling you their salary. Yeah.
Telling you their salary, and say, oh, I need to get this money, or I've got this money coming through. And you're like, oh, it's so gauche.
Yeah.
But it's also a class thing, I think, that.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think like Sarah's really interested, and is kind of like doing a bit of like chatting to people, and might write a blog about it, about those, like having those awkward conversations. And often we will have those conversations with freelancers. Particularly one thing we found a lot is like particularly kind of women and non-binary people, trans people who we've worked with, who work in more like visual mediums, compared to, you know, men that we've interviewed as well for a position, like the rates are, there's a massive disparity.
Yeah.
Now, we can't disclose what an individual person has asked us for free, but we will go back to them and say, just FYI, you need to be charging between like this and this more. Yeah. You know, and we're having conversations because otherwise everyone's undercutting each other, and kind of the institutions are the only people that benefit. Yeah. So I think what I'd say is like, talk to your peers. If there's not a network, create it. You know, whether that's just 5 of you in a pub on a Friday night. I think if you make work on your own, like really find those people, those like, there's loads of groups, there's like a queer freelancers group that go and sit in coffee shops around Manchester, like find your community of people, but also remember that those people in those organisations, a lot of them are people who are artists themselves, or have done that freelance life themselves, and they need you in your artwork, so don't be afraid to ask them for a brew and advice. But I think with producing, I think just, it's not as complicated as you think. It's often just being a bit of a jack of all trades. Yeah. And a lot of it is learning on the job. And a lot of it is just not being too proud to ask someone who's got a bit more experience what you need to do in that area. And then I think just upskilling yourself. Like there's loads of amazing free courses online, like free courses on marketing. There's lots of like community organisations like Salford CVS run amazing training that's like either free to access or cheap, even just things like safeguarding, or like stuff around like contracts. Like there's loads of brilliant organisations who can give you those skills. So yeah, I think connect, upskill yourself, and like just remember your value. Like you are 2 adults having a conversation. Like funders have put a call out, or a venue's put a call out to artists because they need you. Yeah. So I think just like retaining that. Yeah.
Cool. And on that, thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thank you.